Hey, greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. What I wanted to share with you today comes from Julie, not her real name. She is from the Bristol Bay area. This happened on the Kvichak River some 30-some years ago. It's one of her earliest memories, and it involves her dad, her uncle, and her grandpa. So she doesn't remember exactly where she was on the Kvichak River, which is really irrelevant. It's just to get the information out. They were moose hunting and at the same time simultaneously berry picking. So she was with her uppa and they were picking berries. They were up from the riverbank where they were dropped off. Her uppa had a rifle for protection against bears and what have you, right? So when they started picking berries, they had already been out on the river for almost an hour. This was before, sunrise. They wanted to get out early, look for sign of moose and all that kind of stuff, right? So her and her uppa, as soon as it's light enough, they're up on the tundra searching out berry patches, picking salmon berries, blueberries, blackberries. They were going along for about, she recollects, about an hour, and she remembers her uppa saying, come on, grab your bucket and let's go back down to the riverbank, because they had, over that course of time, they kind of worked and weaved their way along a berry patch, working away from the river. And she remembers clearly the concern her uppa had. She was old enough at the time to remember everything, but yet there were some things that she didn't understand at that time, like why her uppa was basically encouraging her to run back to the river, because she was always taught out in the wild, don't run. But in these moments she was told to run, she ran. They get back up to the riverbank and they're walking along. They're basically breaking trail, but when you got a slept over riverbank and you got muskeg and tundra, you're walking along, there's all sorts of little game trails that kind of just run right along the river at times, and they were on one of these. And she remembers clearly that anytime she would look back at her uppa, he would tell her, look forward and keep moving and stay quiet. And so when she heard that a couple times, because she was curious, she was trying to look back, talk to her uppa, engage him, figure out what was going on, he would say the same thing. So she caught on and figured, oh, it must be a bear. They got to a certain point to where the trail kind of was about to get up into some brush, so they stopped. He had her stop, squat down, and he told her, sit down Indian style and count your berries and just, face the river. Well, she would look back periodically and she would notice her uppa looking back the direction they came. And she said she would get these fits of like feeling like a scared jackrabbit, like she wanted to jump up and run. And she was little, so she didn't understand what was making her feel that way. She had been around bears before. They watched them at the dump, a couple different times up by Aleknagik and the Dillingham dump and stuff. So she knew bears, you know what I mean? And she doesn't remember ever having that kind of feeling around a bear. So she's counting her berries. She had 42 blueberries, however many blackberries, and the salmon berries were non-existent because she ate them, right? So she's sitting there, and her uppa tells her, continue counting your berries. And when she reports back, I've already counted them, uppa, he goes, double check, count them again. Make sure, basically keeping her preoccupied on the berries versus what was going on their back trail. So, unbeknownst to her, the reason this was going on is as they were picking berries, her uppa told her this shortly before he passed away. The whole story is as they were going along picking berries, he noticed something big and black following just in the brush. You gotta understand, there's not a lot of big trees along some parts of the river. You'll have a little pocket of black spruce, like a little island of them, and then you'll have, like the willows and alders kind of tangled around those, and sometimes you'll just have a little scrub alders and little scrub willows and whatnot, just in little patches. And as the the train kind of rose up to this little rise. There happened to be at the top of it a little tangle of willows and alders and what have you. And it was behind that this dark thing her Uppa kept seeing. And this was about 40 minutes into their berry picking. So the Uppa notices about 100 yards away initially, moves her along, as she remembers, moves her along to another patch, even though she wasn't done with the salmon berries there, moved her along, and incrementally it got to the point to where this thing was trying to make it get closer, crawling along the tundra and stuff. Her Uppa was watching it. And so he decided, now we're just going to go back towards the river, and that's when, you know, he had her walk and what have you. So that's the first part of what was going on. Now, when they get down to the riverbank and she kept trying to turn around, her Uppa said, just stay real low and be quiet. Stay real low and be quiet. So all the berry counting stopped. She just got real low. She kept feeling like a jackrabbit over and over, and she said it got really, really strong. And after about a half hour to 40 minutes, she's guesstimating of time, her Uppa fired off a shot with the rifle, and she immediately thought bear, because, you know, that's usually when she either hunting moose or scaring a bear away or something like that, is when she would hear gunshots. She said most of the hunters in her family, the only time they would go shooting per se is if they got a new scope on a rifle and had to, you know, sight it in. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of excess shooting, you know, because of the cost of bullets and whatnot. So the one shot goes off, and they're sitting there, and he turned around and told her, be quiet, be quiet. He racks another round into his rifle, and they're sitting there. And a little bit later, they hear the skiff coming back downriver with her dad and uncle. So they come pulling up, and, you know, her Uppa's flagging them down. They come over. Hey, did you get one? Did you get one? He goes, no, I missed it. Here, get her in the boat. So her uncle and her dad get her down in the skiff, and then her Uppa follows. They push off, and they take off upriver a little ways, probably a mile or two, and her Uppa sat there quiet the whole time. And they got up to this spot where there's this bend in the river, and she remembers distinctly that was the spot her uncle almost always got his moose. So they bank it up there, and her uncle gets up on the riverbank, and she's standing on the little bow of the skiff, just trying to peek up above the grass line to see what was going on. And she heard her Uppa talking to her dad, telling him, hey, there's, you know, big dark thing back over there, you know, I think it's the hairy man or whatever. And she remembers it catching her attention because she heard hairy man stories growing up, but as a kid, she never, you know, she just thought it was stories. She'd never really listened. And so she turned around, gets down into the skiff, and starts asking questions like, was it a hairy man? What's a hairy man? And they're just telling her, be quiet, be quiet. So they're about, you know, maybe a couple miles at the most further upriver, if that. I mean, if that. And her uncle comes back over and jumps down in the skiff and says, we need to go. There's something big and black across the river back over there. We need to go. And so they all get back in the skiff. They push off or whatever. And the discussion was that hairy man is following us. And of course, she was little at the time. She didn't have no point of reference because she's never experienced one. She's, like I said, heard the stories, but never had the opportunity to put two and two together. So as Julie's sitting there, they told her eat her berries and keep her head down and stay low in the skiff. So they're in a lund, and there's bench seating that runs across. Depending on the length of it, you got, you know, 3 to 4 little bench seats basically that sit across this, and she was in between two of these bench seats, squatted way low, eating her berries, just kind of bummed out. So they back away from the riverbank, and she remembers they were idling, going real slow, talking, and her uncle had the rifle, her dad was driving the skiff, and her Uppa had a rifle. Now as they're getting back down to where almost to where they were picked up, the uncle says, there it is, it's about 100 yards back. And he's standing up on the bow as they're moving, idling along, so he could see above the riverbank. He goes, it's about 100 yards back. I see it. And as he's saying that, she hears a scream. She said she couldn't fully make it out, but she could tell it was very loud and high-pitched, almost like a whistle. and so that freaked her out in her core. She got real low, as low as she could, and her uppa came and sat closer to her, and was trying to, you know, console her and say, don't worry, you're safe, you're good. And so they're just kind of idling along, putzing along, and she said her uncle kept looking and kept trying to see it, you know, almost like he was going to take a shot at this thing, and her dad was telling him, hey, don't shoot it, don't shoot it. And same with their uppa was telling her uncle, don't shoot it. Well, they get a few bins down below that, and the uncle wants badly to get eyes on it, right? So begrudgingly, her dad agreed, scooped up to the bank. He tied off real quick, jumped, you know, climbed up the bank, and was just kind of standing at the riverbank above them, just kind of looking back and forth up a ways. Well, as he's doing so, her dad comes past her and her uppa and gets up on the bow and then up on the riverbank with his rifle, and they're talking. And as they're talking, she notices a lot of movement all of a sudden, and then they're pointing off to the left, and then they both come scurrying back down into the skiff, push off, and then they get up on step heading down river. Now, once that happened, she said the air changed. It went from curiosity to outright fear in all of them, because I guess her dad told her later, when he jumped up and was with his brother staring up river from where they were, off to their left hand side by some other bushes, they saw one of these things crawling real low, trying to get up closer to them, and it was only about 15-20 yards away where they saw this going on. And so immediately, you know, they got out of Dodge. She still lives in the area. She's gonna try to encourage her dad. Her uncle has since passed. She's gonna try to encourage her dad to share what he saw. Well, to be determined. You know, some elders don't like to share, and I understand that. I don't begrudge them one bit. I want to thank Julie for sharing that. Grant you, not a whole lot to it, but it just showcases how random in nature these things are, these occurrences. I mean, by watching the channel, you'd think every tree is hiding a hairy man, and they're out, you know, they're gonna get you. That's not the case. I feel that way personally, but that's not the case. You know, a lot of these circumstances that happen to people are years between them and vast distances between them as well. But again, I want to thank Julie for sharing. And let's see. Oh, there was something else. Oh, I'm trying to get some one-on-one interviews lined up with some villagers down southeast around the Sitka area. Talk to us about the Kushtaka. There's been talk on the internet and whatnot. I figured it'd be best to go directly to the source. So hopefully, you know, we can get that lined up here in the very near future. And I want to thank you guys again, and we'll catch you on the next one.